You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Red Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right, every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to talk about the recent news from the last few weeks. Apologies for not being here last week, as I usually do the 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we try to do a Monday show, but I went over to the University of California at Berkeley to talk to a graduate planning class taught by my friend Nader. It was really great to go and talk about the last 20 years of work, as well as my journey to planning, my journey to this weird media company that I own after doing a lot of planning. Never expected to be here, but lots of great stories to tell along the way. Also, I was on an episode of How to Meet Your Neighbor with Max Mautner, which is really fun as well. I got to share some of my stories about my neighbors in San Francisco, as well as more of my history as well. I'll put a link to this one, the YouTube channel, in the show notes if folks want to check it out, along with other episodes, including folks you may know, like John Zimmerman, who's been here on this Monday show as well. And also, as we do in Han Solo, I've got some great episodes of Talking Headways to share with you all that are coming up and just finished. We just finished posting our annual prediction show with Yona Freemark. I know that's a listener favorite, so I hope you all enjoyed that one this year. I know it's a little bit of a downer with kind of what's going on in DC, but hopefully we made it fun and exciting and interesting as well as telling stories about Yona's work, which is, he just does so much, and it's really awesome to see how much he's put out there into the world. And actually, this afternoon, I just talked with the ranking Democrat on the House Transportation Committee, Representative Rick Larson. We didn't get too long to chat, but we did talk about some of the things that have come out of this administration and what the Democrats are looking to focus on, especially on the committee in terms of transportation, active transportation, bikes, and those types of things. Obviously, there's some disturbing stuff coming out about, trying to cut all of the green stuff and the transportation projects that we all like bike lanes and stuff like that. So we talk about some of that. We also chatted with Kyle Paoletta about his book, American Oasis, which is a wonderful history book about cities in the Southwest, and as well what we can learn from them in our future. So we had a great discussion about that. I've got folks from Fort Worth's Transportation Department coming up on Thursday to chat with. Leah Rothstein will be here to talk about her book that she wrote with her dad, which is a follow-up to The Color of Law. Richard Rothstein obviously wrote Color of Law. Anthony Flint is coming on to talk about his Mayor's Desk book, where he interviewed mayors all around the country and wrote a book about it. Alexis Madrigal, who's the host of KQED's Forum, will be with us to talk about his book as well. His book is called The Pacific Circuit, so I'm looking forward to that. And I have a bunch of other books coming on range of topics as well. Some stuff you all will appreciate on transportation and stuff, and some stuff it's just kind of random and out there. So I'm looking forward to having that discussion. And also, we're going to have Bill Schultes of Tool Design coming on to talk about how the NACTO and AASHTO bike guides stack up against each other. So that'll be coming up soon. Thanks, Ryan, for pushing that one and getting that to our attention and hooking us up. We appreciate that. So lots of great stuff coming up, lots of great information from the podcast. I've really been liking what we've been doing with the podcast lately. The really great episodes lately. I've just, having Yoni Applebaum on and Stacey Mitchell and discussing a lot of those things that are in tandem and they connect together so well. We're also going to have a couple of episodes where we're talking about lots of other cool stuff as well coming up too. So just, something to look forward to for folks. Well, thanks to everybody who's ordered the Bus and Bike scarves. If you'd like to order one, just head on over to theoverheadwire.com or email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. The bike-only knit scarves are back in stock, so check those out if you get a chance. And as we always note, We really thank everybody supporting the show, whether that's on Patreon or buying books off the bookshop site, bookshop.org/shop/The Overhead Wire. You can also support the show by going to our store and searching, ordering any book that you want, actually, from the bookshop site. So check that out. You can also get our Cars or Cholesterol t-shirts or any other merch you dream of through our TeePublic site, with the design from Richard Wazensky, bit.ly/Cars Are Cholesterol. You can find Richard over at Dick David Sketches on Instagram. And we also strongly suggest folks sign up for the newsletter. We'll plug that a few times in the next 30 minutes or so, but we really hope that you guys check that out. We have an archive of over 100,000 links tagged by topic and city, where you can go back in time and find basically any topic you're looking for. So thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to listening to the ads at the beginning of the show. Thanks for listening to the show. Listen to me talk. I really appreciate that. This is episode 167. We're live and in session. And if you're here, you probably already are on a podcatcher, because I don't advertise this one as much as we do Talking Headways. But if you found us and you're here, we hope you enjoy the Monday shows. You can find us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast Podcasts, and of course, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube as well, just not with video too much. We have a couple of videos up there, like with Wes Marshall, but I haven't really gone too deep into YouTube. It's just a lot more editing and a lot more work to make it as clean as I'd like it to be. So check it out if you get a chance through the podcatchers listening to this show. Also, if you feel so inclined, leave us a review on iTunes. We've had some great reviews. We've had some frustrating reviews, but that's okay. We love your feedback either way. So do that if you get a chance. Well, here is the news. I'm trying to get through this show pretty quickly today. We've got a lot of news to cover, and I don't want to keep you guys waiting too long. Here are some of the stories that piqued our interest from the newsletter over the last few weeks. Of course, you can subscribe to the newsletter at theoverheadwire.com by going to theoverheadwire.com and checking it out there. You can also get the 2-week free trial by signing up, and you get access to our archive, like I just mentioned. So do that if you get a chance. If you haven't already, most of you all are probably already subscribed anyways. Well, here are some of the stories. Utah Legislature takes street planning power. Utah Senate passed a bill that would take multimodal street design and planning power from Salt Lake City. In a last-minute addition to legislation, Senator Wayne Harper added language that precluded cities from designing roads that, quote-unquote, may increase congestion for motor vehicles or discourage motor vehicles from driving on a particular street. This was by Taylor Anderson in Building Salt Lake. Basically, they, he wrote a bill, they had a bill going through, and then they just kind of added this little language in there, and the Democrats didn't even realize it, and so it got through, and they actually ended up changing their votes from yes to no eventually, but it still passed. So, you see a lot of preemption around. I saw also there was in Arizona a bill that was trying to, it was like the Freedom to Drive Act or something like that, where they said, it hasn't passed yet, but it's, passed the House committee, and it says like you can't use VMT as a metric for anything. You can't use it to charge people roads. You can't measure it. You can't check it. And which is, ridiculous because, we talk about VMT all the time here on the show, but stuff like that. So, preemption is coming hard for in different states. We talked about the Texas situation a number of years ago or last year where they took back a road from San Antonio because they didn't like that it was going on a road diet. So things like that are happening all over the country now. Minnesota legislature moves to kill commuter rail line. If passed, a bill in the Minnesota legislature will end commuter rail service on the Northstar line. The line, which has been hit hard by the pandemic and never reached its intended final destination, is now just seeing a fraction of the ridership it once had. Legislators would ask the government to exempt the line from a rule that requires agencies to pay back the federal government if service is discontinued within 90 days of receiving permission from the Federal Transit Administration. The local agency is also considering a bus replacement. This was in Trains magazine. So basically, the Northstar line it never got to where it was supposed to go. It was supposed to go further up to the next big city, it was always kind of minuscule in terms of ridership. A lot of those commuter rail lines from the 2000s really didn't do so well. There's the West in Portland. There's Austin's commuter rail line. This one specifically it seems like they just didn't really ever gel and never really either got to their destinations or never had the service levels that they required. They were probably operating, many of them were operating along freight tracks, which means that they weren't really close to destinations. And so I feel like this is somewhat of a messy thing that happened, which we built these lines and then now they aren't performing, especially after the pandemic when the bottom fell out on commuter traffic. So, these lines, they were good ideas maybe at some point, but they got built and they didn't necessarily work out. This one, I think there's a lot of frustration from locals along the line who built new buildings and stuff. But at the same time, that just kind of like shows you how much some of these lines were, economic development generators. And I've talked on this show how I am definitely pro-transit, pro-trains. I love light rail, I love streetcars and those types of things. But also at the same time, I've, kind of been pushing back on the idea that we should just be building lines, just because we have a right of way or just because we can build one. It's not necessarily the best idea in the world if we can do something better. So just something to think about going forward. Why construction is so expensive. Recently updated research in Yale Law and Economics research paper finds that there are two major issues driving infrastructure costs: a lack of capacity of the departments of transportation procuring the project and the lack of competition for infrastructure contracts. Using data from California, they show that higher quality engineers deliver projects at a lower cost, while retirement shocks slow project timelines and increase costs. So basically, this is saying that, we need capacity at the DOT level. I think this, applies to roads, this paper specifically, but I think it also applies to transit projects. We need capacity at, government capacity to be able to, create these projects and make sure that they're organized and run well. And then we need competition for the contracts from contractors. And one of the things that people have said that I've heard lately is that, the transportation bill is a 6-year bill, but that's kind of short term in infrastructure world, especially if you're trying to build bigger projects. And so if there's more certainty, there's more contractors out there that don't go through these boom and bust cycles. And so I think that's part of the issue there, and kind of what maybe they're dealing with a lot of the times is kind of that up and down in terms of, finding quality competition for the contracts. So something interesting to think about, especially when it comes to transit projects. Single-stair buildings are safe. A new report from the Pew Charitable Trusts and the Center for Building in North America found that residents in single-stair buildings are not at greater risk of fire death because of the building's design. The International Building Code, adopted by most U.S. cities, doesn't allow single-stair buildings above 3 stories. Changes in the code that allow for small single-stair buildings could increase the supply of housing in states and localities. This is by Alex Horowitz and Pew. Yeah, so basically, we talked with Michael Eisen about this, specifically the single-stair buildings, but, one of the things that has kept them from being built is the International International Building Code, which is not really international, actually, and it's adopted by many U.S. cities, and it's kept a lot of these buildings from being built because they're worried about fire. And as we learned from Yoni Applebaum in his book, a lot of the zoning and things that came about in the teens and 20s and 30s was because, basically the people that were trying to zone for segregation figured out that they could do so through fire codes and through figuring out how to do that. But they also exempted single buildings or two family buildings, but they went after the multifamily buildings and were, basically saying that these are fire traps. And, so the codes have been built up around that idea, as well as zoning. So here we have a report that shows that single-stair buildings are actually safe. So it's something that could actually, create a better design that will allow more buildings and more housing units that are less, costly and more cost-effective. So I look forward to that. This was Stephen Smith was part of this as well, a prolific poster on the social medias. El Paso wastewater plant breaks ground. El Paso, Texas has broken ground on the nation's first wastewater treatment plant to send purified water directly to taps. Unlike Las Vegas, which recycles water by returning it to Lake Mead, this facility will use a 4-step process to direct to distribution reuse. The project is scheduled to be completed in 2028 and generate 10 million gallons of drinking water per day for the city, which gets less than 9 inches of rain per year. This was by Martha Skowski in Inside Climate News. Yeah, this was cool. El Paso is doing this. One thing we learned from Kyle Paoletta, which is coming up on a Talking Headways show soon about Las Vegas, is they are really good at recycling water. They actually recycle like 80% of their water and put it back into Lake Mead. And, they do it that way. But this is going to be the first time that a city is going to just put it back into the water system directly instead of back into the lake to where it could be filtered out and cleaned again. So interesting to see what they're doing there, and probably some lessons for cities around the country about recycling. California utilities not entitled to takings claim in streetcar project. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear a case in which a lower court ruled that a utility company wasn't entitled to compensation when the Orange County Transportation Authority required it to move equipment from the right-of-way for a streetcar project. The decision means utility companies in California must cover the cost of relocating infrastructure in the right-of-way, which has been a long-standing point of contention between transit agencies and utilities nationwide. This was in Bloomberg Law by Shana Green. And there was also a piece in it by Stephen Schwinn in the LPB network about this. So, one of the things that we often complain about is how like costs are lumped onto these transit projects. And one of the costs is, basically rebuilding a road. But part of that rebuilding of the road is moving utilities. And so in this finding, specifically in California, they found that the takings did not apply. So they were required, the utility company was required to move their equipment in order to accommodate the streetcar. And so they didn't have to pay for it. They were required to do it. And so this is, I didn't, see the details specifically, but it seemed to be that it was a California specific thing. But if it's around the country, that might actually mean, great things for, streetcar projects. I think a lot of these costs are negotiated between the streetcar planners and the construction companies and the utilities. But it might be interesting to have, basically the utilities pay for their relocation, the things that they already put in the way. So I would like that. I'd appreciate that. German cities prepare for energy transition. Mannheim, Germany is phasing out natural gas for heating, expanding district heating with heat pumps, and offering households €10,000 subsidy to switch to electricity. Meanwhile, Hamburg is mapping heat infrastructure to identify neighborhoods ready to transition by 2026. In the long run, the shift will cut costs for German utilities as carbon prices rise and the country targets a 2035 fossil fuel phase-out. This was by the Progress Playbook. Giving up a car to buy a home. Ken Miguel Cipriano bought his first home in Grand Rapids, Michigan by giving up his car. As a lifelong transit rider, it wasn't a big shift, but it did help him save for a down payment. With car ownership costing at least $10,000 a year, those savings add up fast. This was by Alaire Conte and Realtor.com. And a nation of homebodies. Since 2003, people have been spending more time at home, a trend that accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic. Even before the pandemic, time spent outside the home had dropped by 30 minutes a day. Remote work has only deepened the shift, reshaping offices, retail, transit ridership, and even mental health, with loneliness on the rise. This was in the conversation. People have been staying home more. I've noticed I've been staying home more, but I think it's because I have a 2-year-old. I think that's the biggest thing for me. But I before the pandemic, I was going out a fair amount, the same amount that I'd always been, even though I was working from home. So I think it's, for me specifically, it's 2-year-olds, but maybe for other folks, they've just been getting caught up in watching Netflix or going online and chatting with their friends or playing games or whatever it may be. But I just think that's interesting finding. City pioneering flood insurance. Fremont, California is pioneering Parametric insurance, a citywide flood insurance mechanism. If a flooding parameter is met, a payout is triggered, and that money can be used for recovery or helping individual residents. While Parametric insurance has been used for neighborhoods, this specific type has never been used for a whole city. This was by Leslie Kaufman in Insurance Journal. Interesting stuff there. I think that, cities might be the ones on the hook at some point for insurance, especially as it comes to climate change, because of what happens with insurance companies being able to insure individual houses and the cost of that. So if it's, a citywide, measure, it might be better off for people and individuals, and maybe they end up paying the city and the city actually takes care of it, which might actually reduce risks. If something big happens, it's covered by a group of folks who are putting together for the whole city instead of individual policy owners that are spread out among bunches of companies. It might be the future. I don't know, but it's interesting to see that the cities are doing this, and Fremont is starting the ball rolling. Okay, that was it for the main items that people were interested in reading the most, but these are the bonus items. These are the ones that I wrote I thought were interesting. Maybe you will too. Developers in South Korea will soon be able to to sell development rights from cultural areas with strict restrictions to allow development in nearby neighborhoods. The program is expected to help increase the economic viability of development projects. This was in the Chosun Daily. I always talk about the transfer of development rights. I think, it's tricky because of where you get the rights and then where you transfer them to, but I just think it's such a great idea to try to, basically if you're trying to preserve something, why not just transfer the rights for that to somewhere else and make it a bit more denser, a bit taller. I know that, this hasn't been taking off in around the United States as much as it maybe should, but it's something that I hope for. New research at the University of Illinois looked at traffic in Los Angeles and cell phone activity and linked them to fast food restaurants and found that when traffic went up due to unexpected slowdowns, visits to fast food joints increased. This was in Fast Company. So basically traffic is causing people to eat more fast food. I think it's probably because it's harder to get home. It's harder to go home and have that time to cook. And then you have to go and grab something. You have to eat something. So you go to a fast food place and it's easier and it's fast. And that's why it's called fast food. And I don't think it's super healthy. I think it's another way that traffic and transportation policy that is rolled up in cars is negative for us, but it's an interesting finding nonetheless. As climate change increases, we should pay more attention to the possibility of getting airborne fungal infections such as valley fever. Infection is more likely after times of drought followed by intense rains, which is driven by climate change. This was in Vox. Valley fever is nothing to sneeze at. This is a fungal infection that basically from the air pollution, especially in the Central Valley here in California and Bakersfield, my sister had it at some point. Basically, fungus gets dragged up from the ground when, farmers are tilling their fields and things like that. And it goes to the air and then it gets caught in people's lungs and it grows and it causes problems like a immune response. And it's pretty nasty and people get, knocked out by it and are out for a long time. And so this type of thing can increase over time as more, basically as climate change changes what's happening through, the weather systems, drought and then intense rains and the cycles that continue and get worse and worse as we move forward. In an extraordinary event, Oregon's DOT Assistant Director said that the agency had overestimated federal support by $1 billion in its 2023-2025 budget. The error was torched by auditors who wondered why the agency didn't reconcile what the agency's bank accounts were showing with their projections. This was in Willamette Week. That's crazy. ODOT basically thought that they had another $1 billion from the feds and they didn't. That's just crazy. I can't believe it. State DOT and ODOT is just, they're in big trouble now. They've just been spending so much. Reed City Observatory, go check out Joe Courtwright's site, and there's tons of stuff on ODOT and what they've been doing with the highways up there. It's madness. U.S. embassies and consulates in cities around the world began collecting air quality information and releasing the data on social media. The move upset local governments, including Beijing, but was ultimately getting them to improve their air quality monitoring and cleaning up the air. The program was ended by the Trump administration. This was in the New York Times. So basically, embassies set up air monitoring stations, and then they reported them on Twitter and online, basically by the hour. And this got local, governments that they were in upset, but ultimately it led them to cleaner air in the long run, which is really good. I'm sad that program's ending. It would be really cool to see how that, over time the improvements are made. A new report on London's low emission zone found that nitrogen dioxide pollution from vehicles had been reduced 27% in the city, and PM 2.5 is down 31%. 90% of monitoring stations around the city have reported better air quality. This is in BBC News. Congestion pricing, the low emission zone, all this stuff that keeps cars out and keeps exhaust emissions out is going to make it better for air quality. And you're seeing this in New York City right now with the congestion pricing, and you're seeing this in London, obviously, as well as Barcelona and other places that have this, maybe not Barcelona, but other European countries and cities that are having this low emission zones happening. I think Birmingham is one of them. It's just been beneficial for the air quality, and reducing cars is good for noise. We all heard this. We all know this, but during the pandemic, less noise from cars, people driving around. You could hear birds chirp. It was weird, in a good way, that we got, those changes, and we know what it's actually like when we turn off the car noise and the car exhaust. Really good stuff. A new vehicle barrier made of rubber has been approved for use on roads that have speed limits of 45 miles per hour or less. The barrier is made from 100% recycled tires and can be used as an alternative to concrete jersey barriers while being better at absorbing kinetic energy. This was in Equipment World. Basically, it's a Jersey barrier that's rubber. Now it's called the Colorado barrier, and that's cool. You can use these on 44 mile per hour roads or less, which means kind of low speed roads, but you can use them for bike lanes. And also, since they're rubber, the cars aren't going to hit them as hard and scrape themselves or whatever else. They might bounce off, maybe. But that's one of the things I think, the driving system that we have facilitates is, not putting up barriers because they're worried that will damage cars and then they'll have insurance claims and things like that. But let's rubberize them maybe and see what happens. And finally, in fantastical railway news from around the world, Mexico is considering building a railway that would compete with the Panama Canal, connecting the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, while European boosters consider networking together all of the Eurozone's high-speed rail lines into one system. This was in We Build Value and Fast Company. That's really interesting. Mexico is considering building this railway that basically would connect the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans and compete with the Panama Canal. It would put all the containers on trains and send them across this isthmus and compete. Interesting. And then the networked Eurozone high-speed rail is great. What a cool idea. So lots of really great news today. Interesting stuff. And so just we've got some really cool stories coming up too in the podcast. So with this news, and listen up, and don't know why I'm saying this stuff. So well, that's it for this week. This week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without you. So thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. We've had people sign up each month during the pandemic, so we're super appreciative for that. $2 a month will get you some stickers, a handwritten note, and a really cool transit station stamp. And $10 a month will get you one of your own bus or bike only scarves. Also, I want to mention that we did produce an audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's 1909 classic, Town Planning and Practice. If you want to get your hands on one, go to raymondunwin.com. You can download it like a podcast. And this book was really fun to produce. And if you're a history of planning fan, it's the very first one listed on the American Planning Association's 100 Essential Books of Planning. Listener questions and comments. If you have a comment or a question, feel free to tweet at us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears, or feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. If you have any questions, shoot them over to theoverheadwire@gmail.com. We appreciate all your questions, all your comments, and even if you want to send one, and we've had many people send them and say, don't publish this. So they just have something nice to say or something interesting to say, but are like, yeah, don't share this. It's fine. Send it over and I won't do that. But if you want it read out on the air, I'm happy to do that too. So finally, puppies and butterflies. This is part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe doesn't fit in the other sections. I'm just trying to take some joy where I can find it. Last weekend, my wife and daughter and my parents and I went to dim sum, and my daughter ate so much that she seemed like she was going to pass out in a food coma, which was really funny. The other funny part was that we went to this place on Geary, and right as we walked in, I was kind of like wondering why it felt so hazy. And we walked in, and as soon as we sat down, we started marking up our menus to order some stuff. And then everybody was told to leave, and the fire truck showed up, and there was actually a fire in the building next door. And so we decided that we would go a couple blocks down to another dim sum place because we weren't sure when they were going to let people back in the building, and we were hungry. So you know what? That's one of the things that I just love about this city is that, you get kicked out of a dim sum place, you just walk a couple blocks and there's another one. And, there's just so much diversity and wonderful, economic activity about this place. There's such a wonderful vibe as well. I mean, even though that place, I'm sure we'll be back to the place that, was basically in the center of a fire, because by the time we walked back, the fire trucks had gone and it looked fine and everybody was back inside. But, I'm sure it'll be fine. And, but just the ability to go different places in the city and have these experiences and have a lot of fun. I don't know. I just like that. It's cool. So I'm enjoying San Francisco. I'm enjoying living here. Despite what people are saying, it's a great spot. Well, you can find me on Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes Threads, Substack, YouTube, and of course my website, and in your inbox every morning if you sign up for the newsletter. And also if you go to Flickr, you can find me at Transit Nerds. Everything else is at the Overhead Wire. I want to thank everybody for joining us at Mondays at the Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous patrons for sponsoring this week's podcast. Thanks to our guests who come on the Talking Headways show. Thanks to our guests who come on our Monday shows as well. We'll have some of those soon. And we'll see you next time.
Talking